Our continues now at 26 past the hour. President Trump is defending his response to the Los Angeles protests, calling the demonstrators, quote, insurrectionists. He made those comments on Truth Social last night, saying Governor Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass should apologize for the, quote, horrible job they have done. But earlier, when speaking to reporters, Trump stopped short of saying the protests constituted an insurrection.
Are you prepared to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Depends on whether or not there's an insurrection. No, but you have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it. And when they spit at people, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit, and worse, you know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, they spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away, and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
Joining us now, NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kuby. Courtney, let's talk about the military angle here with Marines on standby. What's the potential here for that to happen, and what would that mean?
So at this point, Mika, as far as we know, there's only about 300 of the National Guard, California National Guard troops who are actually on scene. There are at least 3 different locations. But remember, this authorization is to federalize up to 2,000. So it would make more sense if they would work through, or they would use all 2,000 of those before they would turn to those Marines. But what people need to remember is yes, these are California National Guard troops who are being used here. But we heard Jacob earlier talk about them being under Title 10 authority. What that means is they are essentially federalized. They are under the authority of the federal government. They're paid by them. They get benefits under the federal government while they're serving. And they are also under the same restrictions that federal troops face when they are operating in the United States. Why that's so critical in this case here is because if you have a National Guard soldier who is under California law, or is under California state activation, that means that they are answering to and under the authority of the Governor Newsom, who we've heard from earlier in the show already. Now, in that capacity, they have some ability to conduct law enforcement missions, to support the local law enforcement, but they have a little bit more authority with actually taking on or conducting law enforcement missions. Once those troops are federalized, that goes away. They can still support the LAPD and they can support the ICE agents who are there, but they cannot make arrests or conduct what we think of as very basic law enforcement activities. That's a violation of Posse Comitatus, which is an act that essentially says you can't have federal troops conducting law enforcement in the continental United States. Now, what we usually see Title 10 troops, National Guard troops on federal duty doing is deploying overseas, and that would even be the case for this unit, the 79th Infantry Brigade Combat Team out of California. They have done these deployments overseas, so the Title 10 status is not uncommon. But putting them on Title 10 and then putting them in the United States, that's what's so uncommon here. And what's the most unique part about this is the president doing it despite the governor saying, the governor not asking for these troops, but specifically saying that he doesn't want the troops to be there. Now, the Marines here, 500 are now under or on a hot standby. They have to be ready to go very quickly. What's really critical about them is they will also be federalized. That makes sense. They are active duty. The question everyone should be asking here, though, Mika, is are they actually trained for any of the kinds of law enforcement or the sorts of functions that they could be called upon to do here? That's one of the questions we've been asking.
So, Courtney, there's been a lot of escalatory rhetoric from Trump's top advisor, Stephen Miller, posting simply one word, insurrection. J.D. Vance, similar. Trump himself suggesting that all of the federal law enforcement agencies should be involved. And, of course, Secretary of Defense Hegseth. So if the federal government decides to up the ante here with their response beyond what we've seen so far, what are some of the things they could do here? Because you're right, and all of it's being done against the wishes of local and state leaders.
So they can do very basic things in support of LAPD and ICE. So traffic enforcement, they can put them outside of federal buildings. That's one thing that we've already seen, where they're basically a show of presence. Now, we have seen from the video and the photos there that they are armed. We have asked about the basic rules of force here. When you're talking about an overseas mission or a combat, you hear rules of engagement. When you're talking in the homeland, they refer to it as rules of force. We don't have an answer beyond there. They are still under the authorities of the basic rules of force here. So presumably, that means that they will follow the law and they will, they'll protect federal buildings. They will protect ICE agents. They will protect any kind of federal personnel who are there, but they will not engage in things like arrests. Like I said, they could be at barricades hanging out there. One thing that I have been very struck by in this, Jonathan, and we got a statement from U.S. Northern Command late last night that said that they had established a task force. They're calling it Task Force 51. It's under a 2-star general. Generally, when you have something, a brigade combat team is about 3,500 up to 5,000 different troops. This is smaller than that. It's about half that size, 2,000 troops. That would generally be under the authority of a colonel, okay? Instead, they're putting this task force under a 2-star general. That shows, to me, the significance that they are placing on this, on this mission in general, that they are putting someone so high-ranking involved in it. Military officials, defense officials who I spoke with, are very concerned about the possibility of the military being used here in ways that they should not be, and actually, the perception that they are actually fighting against or taking on civilians in the streets of LA. And that may be one reason that they have someone so senior overseeing this entire task force.
Yeah. And that certainly would change the nature of this situation. And at this point of the presidency, NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kuby, thank you very much for your coverage.